If you'll give us just a second, John Chase is coming in right now.
Okay.
Hello.
Good evening, John.
How are you guys?
So have we got all the council members on, Jennifer? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are we missing one?
I think we've got everybody.
Okay, great. If that's the case, then good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here. I'm Patrick Fitzsimmons, Mayor of Weaverville, and tonight I want to, yes, Jennifer?
Is Andrew on?
I haven't seen him, but I can only see a page at a time. Andrew, you there?
He is not.
He's coming in right now.
Okay. Sorry, we'll start over in a minute, guys. Andrew, you on? Okay, cool. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 2022 workshop of Weaverville Town Council. What we typically do at the workshops, the monthly workshops, is use these as a learning opportunity and an opportunity to hear from the public about issues that are important to us as we prepare to make decisions. And tonight's my screen is jumping around. I hope that's okay. Tonight's topic is the water plant expansion possibilities for the town of Weaverville. So tonight we will be learning from different folks who will give us three presentations, as well as wanting to hear from the public about their questions or their concerns or their ideas about water plant expansion in Weaverville. I apologize that tonight is remote only, but due to the spike in Omicron cases that we're experiencing here in Buncombe County, and because of the bad weather we've experienced this weekend, it seemed like the safest thing for us to do was to meet digitally tonight. I can tell you that this plan, our regular council meeting, is scheduled for next Monday night, the 24th. We do anticipate and hope this will be a regular in-person meeting that will have remote access capabilities. We now have invested in the equipment we need to be able to make meeting remotely more convenient and easy for the public. So as far as you know at this point, we will have both options, in person and remote access available at next week's meeting. If that changes, we'll post as much as we can. For those who want to participate tonight, if you're not real Zoom knowledgeable, if you take your cursor and scroll it to the bottom of your screen, you're going to see an icon that says reactions. If you want to speak and you want to be heard, if you press that icon that says reactions, you'll see one option which says raise hand. When you raise your hand, a little hand is going to appear in your picture on the screen, and that will clue in Jennifer Jackson, town attorney, who is now also acting tonight as Zoom master, that you want to speak. And she's going to try and keep track of everyone who raises their hand so they get the opportunity to speak tonight, as well as either call upon them or indicate to me to call upon them in order as she receives them. So again, if you want to speak, when we get to the public comment section, take your cursor to the bottom of your screen where you see the icon that says reactions, click on that, and then hit raise your hand. But before we get to that section, we'll be hearing presentations from three different sets of folks this evening. The first, we'll be hearing from Withers Ravenel, which is the engineering firm who the town has contracted with to design a potential expansion of our water plant. Then we'll be hearing from Save the Ivy River folks. And then lastly, we'll be hearing from a committee appointed by the Weaverville Council, consisting of 3 council members who have been doing research over the past couple of months on this issue, and we'll be hearing their report as well. I'd like to also indicate that for council members, even when we're done with the public meeting tonight, if you would stick around and stay on screen, we do have a closed session we want to have this evening to talk to our attorney about some legal issues around the matter that we're discussing tonight. So I think that covers all of the logistics, if you will. Thanks again for everyone being here. This is an important issue for the future of our town. So I'm glad to see we have a wide interest from the public and that their participation this evening. So let's hear from our first presenter, which is going to be the folks from Withers Ravenel and Ken Ori. We'll call on you if you would tell us what you all know from the engineering side of things about building a water plant expansion in Weaverville. Ken?
All right, so as soon as I find the unmute button, okay. So the first things I believe Jennifer was driving. Is that what I heard?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So our presentation.
Did you want to share that, or do you want me to?
Okay, I wasn't sure, so I do have it called up. So a lot of times when you have this type of venue, you turn off sharing capabilities. So I wasn't sure. Can everyone, you can see the beat. Now, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so first off, I'd like to take the opportunity and say thank you to the mayor, thank you to the council members for the opportunity. I mean, honestly, it's not very often that you do get to have these deep discussions over water, over sewer, and different type of infrastructure. So I appreciate the opportunity to even have this discussion, because the more education we have as part of this process, the more educated the whole region becomes, not just Weaverville. So my name is Ken Ori. I am the Director of Engineering for Withers Ravenel, meaning I oversee special projects and several of the larger projects in the state, as well as I'm acting as the client service manager, making sure that such a large project goes smoothly for Weaverville. Also in the Zoom audience, we have Joe McGugan, who is a lead engineer, as well as Casey Garland, PhD PE, who is the individual project manager on this. So the three of us are here. We're going to try and address questions and comments the best we can. However, we may not be able to address every question right now, but what we can do is get back to you and get back to the group, the subcommittee, with any kind of answers that we can. Ultimately, for those in the group that weren't here for our presentation back in September, I think it was September, currently the town operates a 1.5 million gallon a day of plant. And we were contracted just over about a year and a half. Yes.
Are you sharing your presentation?
Yes, it says you are screen sharing. Is it too slow?
We're seeing your puppy though.
Oh, sorry, it got moved. Okay, that was my puppy hiking.
There we
There
go.
we
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
I moved
it's
it.
a cute puppy.
And the
I know,
puppy
right?
computer.
Actually, that puppy is 10 and a half years old, just saying. All right, so the good news is you didn't miss much, and you had a cute puppy in the background to continue on. So this is just the group. Again, Joe and Casey are also in the audience, and we currently, the town operates a 1.5 million gallon a day treatment plant. We were contracted just over about a year ago, if not two now, to work with the town to increase the capacity at that treatment plant. Right, and you can see there in 2017. And ultimately, building capacity at a plant, expansions of plant, typically you don't get into these type of discussions. Normally towns, again, they come to you as an engineer, we enter into a contract. We are not, I want to be clear, we are not advocating for the expansion. We are not on either side of this debate. We are the engineers that are responsible for providing the service to the town. The reason I say that is because really what you have in front of you, Mayor and Council, is not an engineering decision. You have a lot of factors, and that's why this meeting is so well timed. You have generational opportunity funding to you now. You have inflation that is only going to make this project more expensive for years to come. And ultimately, there is no engineering solution for the political issue at hand. We are more than capable of providing these services. We are more than capable of providing answers to questions from an engineering basis. But really what you have in front of you is a question of how you want to provide for the future of Weaverville. That future can take two roads. On one hand, you can expand the plant and provide capacity for homes. On the other hand, you can go the route of water conservation and somewhat get into the regulatory aspect of regulating and limiting personal use of the water. Whichever solution this council and mayor wish, ultimately there is going to be ramifications for each side. On the water expansion side, it's a very easy process. There's obviously an increased cost with the plant expansion. We can have the discussion as to the impact of the river on taking out a maximum of an additional 1.5 million gallons a day, over 20, 30 years. And on the flip side, there's the conservation argument, which essentially, you become into the business of regulating residential customers and commercial customers' water usage, which in itself details an entirely different regulatory structure within the town. There are positives and there are negatives to both sides, and we are here to help you weigh those, and we are here to help you make a decision. Ultimately, if you decide to go with a plan expansion, then we are here and we can provide those services and guide you through that. If you go through the water conservation route, that is largely, kind of more of a legal route of trying to regulate the different uses, the different caps, and you kind of get into a different environment. So that's kind of my general opening statement. With respect to our current status, I'm gonna turn this over to Casey Garland. Jennifer, if that's not too difficult, if you're gonna go ahead and mute me.
And he is muted.
Sorry, I hit that button really fast. I'm so sorry.
Just on top of it. Ken, if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide. Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Garland, as Ken said. I'm the project manager on this, so I've been helping to move this along as much as we can, going through, as going through right now, the environmental assessment and preliminary engineering report. So the original plan was to apply to U.S. Department of Agriculture for funds. Through that process, they require a preliminary engineering report that looks at the different alternatives that can be, that the town can choose to provide water for Weaverville, and also providing those details through the environmental assessment to all of the relevant agencies. We go through SHPO, we go through Fish and Wildlife, we go through floodplain coordination, air quality, everything. There is a list of, I think, 13, 14 different entities that we have to alert that we are doing this project, so that they are allowed to weigh in and comment and put any kind of restriction, maybe not restrictions, but requirements for us to do or avoid to not have any adverse impacts to the environment. So we do go through that process. We've prepared that documentation, and as of right now, we are on hold to submit that to the USDA until until we have a little bit more information from you guys, and also from just moving forward with some other project goals. So the USDA, both USDA and the state is engaged in this process. We have pulled out a few of those items from the application to also send to the Department of, or Division of Water Infrastructure, excuse me, to also have some items in there covered. There are some very important resiliency components to the plant that need to be provided for, that we believe that the state could also pay for as part of that, that is not due to the expansion, but just provides some very essential needs for the plant itself. So you go ahead and advance. So our next steps in this are really going through reviewing the financial impacts of the town. Part of the reason why we're going to Division of Water Infrastructure for funds is, as Ken alluded, there is incredible inflation, and just with the current economy, things are much higher than were originally planned. So we're trying to work out some of those tidbits of how the financials work with all of the components that are in the expansion. Part of the USDA application includes a public hearing where all of the comments, very similar to this, all the public comments are heard and commented on and submitted to USDA, and they review those as well. Completing the USDA application after that's already completed, and then moving forward, of course, with final design, bidding, construction, startup, whatnot, if and how it goes through the USDA process. So that's really what we're looking at right now. So have prepared documentation to these various funding entities to move the project through, and are working with you guys to sort through a lot of the questions and uncertainties, and just trying to make this process smooth for all. So with that, I'd say we open it up for Q&A, but it looks like we may be saving that to the very end. So I will hand it back over to Mayor Fitzsimons and let him take it from here.
Thank you, Casey and Ken, and we appreciate all your work at Weatherspoon. And yes, we will, if people would jot down your questions, if you have questions for Weatherspoon, and I hate to make you guys stick around, but if you can stick around until the public comment section, which will be immediately after the three presentations, which hopefully will be as concise and brief as yours were. So thank you all. Next, we want to hear from the folks at Save the Ivy River, and James Heinel, if you could tell us what you all have learned.
All right. Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is James Heinel. I represent Save Ivy River. We formed to engage and educate all of our community members in the hopes that we could establish a sustainable path forward for our region and our water needs. So in 50 to 100 years, we hope that those that are looking back on our actions today will say, wow, they really had a vision. So when I heard about the expansion to 3 million gallons a day, I really wasn't sure what that meant. Was that a lot? Did it make a difference? I had a lot of questions. So I've learned a lot. Along with volunteers and consultants, we've spent hundreds of hours in the last few months researching and engaging with a really diverse group of stakeholders that these issues include. After all that time, we still have a lot of questions, but here are some of the preliminary conclusions we've come up with. This really is a multi-generational decision, and it requires a long-term strategy, not short-term action. We have time before a vote on expansion is needed. If you only remember one thing I say today, that was it. We do have time. Not only do we have time, but we also need time. We do not have enough information to make a sound decision. A lot of necessary data collection is required in lieu of using averages and estimates. Awareness surrounding this is growing rapidly, and many of our stakeholders need to be considered. Alternatives to expansion have more positive long-term financial and environmental results. Short-term and affordable solutions exist to extend the time before a decision is needed. To back up just a little bit, some history and findings of our research. in 1993, almost 30 years ago, the state established the guidelines for the Ivy River water removal. To our knowledge, no environmental impact assessments have been performed since. They use data from the USGS monitoring site, which measures volume and flow of water in the river. And that site is located 9 miles downriver from the actual pump house for the water treatment plant. And they did not use or collect actual data at the pump house where the water treatment plant is. The flow at the pump house is less by roughly a fifth the flow at the USGS. Another thing to consider is seasonal fluctuation on the Ivy. Highs occur in the spring when we have more rainfall and the river rises to around 50 million gallons a day, and lows in the summer around 20 million gallons a day. This does not include drought scenarios. The highest water consumption occurs at these lowest levels in late summer. And that is actually when the highest usage for the water treatment plant occurs, is in late summer. So at 3 million gallons a day, if the plant were to be expanded, that would mean we'd be drawing 15% of the water in the driest seasons. What we found is historical environmental studies are not readily available, and the ability to assess the impact of the current withdrawal is not very. We can start to collect data points now, and we have begun this process, but it takes time. I had someone that was going to join us and speak to one of those data sets. It was a macroinvertebrate study that was just performed on the Ivy River. And unfortunately, she could not make it, but I will try to do it justice. Macroinvertebrate, I did not know, is basically the tiny bugs that live on the river. And it's just one of many data points that are needed to really understand the environmental impact of drawing water out of the river. So unfortunately, since she can't be here, I will have to wait on evolving that a little bit. So moving on to some stakeholder sentiment. So council brought up several concerns. We've been following the conversations at town meetings and workshops closely, and have heard several concerns raised by council as a sense of urgency to move forward with this expansion. The main concern was supply and demand, and the question, when will the current capacity become strained? At the subcommittee meeting last week, we discussed this in depth, and the current usage is well below the capacity of the current facility, around 700,000 gallons of the 1.5 million gallons of capacity. This includes taking into consideration the time it takes to construct the additional capacity and the current and forecasted future growth. Excuse me for a second. And I apologize that I don't have slides for this. I'm not too savvy on Zoom presentation, so I will have to try to talk you through it rather than show you. We also heard from council and read several times the concern that this was a first come, first served available resource. And Mars Hill was specifically mentioned. And just so everyone knows, Mars Hill has its own water facility, and they do have plenty of available capacity. They don't have any immediate plans for looking for alternatives. They do rely on the water treatment plant as an emergency backup, but it is not a primary source. And it should also be noted that they are in the same watershed as the Ivy River. So regardless of whether they draw it from the plant or from their current sources, they're still drawing from the same watershed. Another concern of council was about the escalation in construction costs. Escalation is pretty hard to predict. I'm not going to try to. You can reasonably assume that it has tapered off significantly from what we saw in the last 2 years. So if you wait a year from now, you can reasonably assume you won't see a major price increase from today, and possibly you might even see it settle down a little bit, like we see in the construction industry for plywood, for example. So community concerns was a big part of our efforts. This decision is a lot bigger than just the town of Weaverville or the utility users of the water treatment plant. So in addition to Weaverville town residents, you have to consider Madison County residents and their local government and their future water needs. We've heard couple times about potentially tying Marshall into this water treatment plant and providing them with water because of their well needs. A large area along the Ivy River, as well as the Ivy River watershed, falls within Madison County. And so there are several property owners in Madison County along the river and within Madison County. There are also North Buncombe residents who are not within town limits and are not on the utilities. Barnardsville in particular, well, we've heard from a lot of Barnardsville residents. They still remember the original impact from 1993 from the water cleanup. And then utility users outside of Weaverville, that's about 30% of the water customers of the water treatment plant that are not town residents. And then, let's see, I apologize. So we recently put out a survey. Last week, we put out the survey to engage the community. We had over 500 site visitors and 221 survey responses in a week. More were coming in, but we had to cut it off at 12 today in order to be able to sort the data a bit. And main takeaways, the first one is it's obvious there's a lot of community sentiment and care on this subject. 82% of total respondents were against expansion, 13% were unsure, and 2% were for expansion. 25% of all respondents were town of Weaverville residents or utility users, which highlights the interest of stakeholders outside of the service area. But they are still within the watershed and our community as defined. Within this group of town residents, 85% believe the decision should be postponed. The comments section of the survey derived the following trends. A large proportion of comments centered around environmental and growth concerns, the majority. We won't be touching on the growth topic today. There is a public hearing set in February that the public can attend that has to do with some of the growth concerns, because we heard from a lot of you very concerned about growth and what that means for the area. And so we won't be elaborating on that today. Cost of escalation for utility users was another trend in the comments, as this expansion would increase rates to those who are customers of the water treatment plant. And another one of the main things is the sharing of the resources from neighbors, from those that were not town residents, concerned about how we are all sharing this valuable resource in the Ivy River. So to summarize this section, we have a much larger stakeholder group than the town and utility users that are impacted by this decision, and they're showing a great interest in this result. So a couple of requests we have based on our findings. We believe we need actual flow studies performed at the water treatment plant pump, and recommend a stream gauge be installed so that we can begin collecting actual data rather than using estimates from 9 miles downstream. A robust habitat study should be prioritized and performed so that we can have benchmarks for ongoing evaluation of the river's health to see the impacts of the draws. We also believe we need to have a collaborative cadence with all stakeholders so that everyone can have a voice. We would like to have a consideration of the alternatives that we're going to propose in the next section, and also the development of enforceable, executable drought management plans. So in the event that we suffer an extended drought, having the measures that can be enforced to make sure that we don't detriment the health of the river. Okay, I need another sip of water. Apologize that that was a little long-winded. So now to discuss the alternatives, and I want to start with a vision. I don't know how many of you have been to Greenville recently, but we were just there. And as you walk downtown, they have the notorious waterfall, and they have a skyway bridge. You can walk around and see it. What else they have is all of the buildings, a lot of the buildings in downtown have water features along them. So as you're walking along the sidewalks, a bunch of these buildings have these waterfalls cascading right along the sidewalk, water features, sorry. And that didn't happen overnight. That was a vision that folks came together 30, 40 years ago and began to formulate and said, let's tie in this central vision to all of us and make it a part of our system. So in order to evaluate this on a vision long-term, again, looking 50, 100 years from now, some of the short-term steps that we think you can take or we can take to maximize our current available resource. The first one is efficiencies. So basically doing more with the resources we have, the 1.5 million gallons. And there are retrofit programs, which mean basically you offer your utility users a voucher for a toilet, and when they replace a high flow toilet with a low flow toilet, you can save them. They can save money on their utility bill, and you can save capacity on your water treatment plant. Sorry, I'm trying to follow my own notes here. Oh, another short-term efficiency is the rate structure. So we recommend that Weaverville engage in a rate structure consultation. So Reftelis estimated, we spoke with Reftelis, they estimated a cost between $25,000 and $30,000 for Weaverville. They did perform the Asheville rate review. What they do is they conduct a detailed rate study looking at customer billing and price elasticity, and then they optimize rates that provide both conservation and revenue for the town, or for the water treatment facility. So the likely outcome there, they would probably recommend replacing the current rate structure, a 5-tier structure that applies to both residential and commercial, with separate commercial and residential 3-tier systems. We have a lot more background on this stuff, but in order for time, I didn't include it. So I am going to provide a lot of the background content that I've been talking about in a follow-up. And then another a medium-term step we can take to look at a vision that's long-term is to look a little more in depth in the Asheville connection or another diversifier. So currently Weaverville relies solely on the Ivy River watershed and does not have diversification in their water resources. And while there were concerns posted about the Asheville water system, I think a little more diligence on that subject should be vetted out before you discount it. And in a long-term vision is, excuse me one second. So in place of expanding the current plant in its current position, we envision an Ivy River co-op. And this co-op would be located, basically building a second water treatment plant that is 8.7 miles downstream of the current plant, where the flow is almost 15% higher, located right at the 2570 bridge. And it would be a partnership with Madison County. As you guys have mentioned, Marshall may eventually need water from the current water treatment plant. This aligns with the regional vision, and it makes it equitable for all the stakeholders involved. It minimizes the environmental impact by moving it down to the base of the river where it feeds near the French Broad. And there's actually a hydroelectric dam right there that's almost like an environmental break that everything upriver, the impact of drawing there versus drawing in an additional 1.5 million gallons in the current location is minimized significantly. A couple of the benefits to this, there's excellent infrastructure access. You're right on 2570, which creates the opportunity to tap into high electrical utilities. It has the the highway there, so running new pipelines and et cetera are a lot easier when you're digging along the highway rather than through residential areas. And there's a lot more that went behind this, but basically, to sum this long-term vision up, it's accessible, it's efficient, it's executable, and it's ideal for all of us. And so I hope you guys will consider vetting those out more fully. Again, there's a lot more content behind it, but I did have a time frame. And I apologize that it was just me talking and not pictures, because my pictures look a lot better than me talking. So my closing thought, we have time to collaborate, be excellent stewards for future generations. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, James. Appreciate your work. And if you could stick around too, because I'm sure that some of the folks in the public will have questions for you as well. So thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
Joseph McGugan with Withers Ravenel, he had his hand up before Mr. Heinel began to speak, and I failed to see him. I don't know whether Joe would like to make comments now or whether you want him to wait until we get to question and answer.
Does it, I'm flexible. Joe, do you have something that you need to say now, or do you want to wait?
No, it can wait till the final comments. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so our third presentation is from a committee which has been appointed by the Weaverville Council to research this issue some more. And those are 3 council members, Vice Mayor Jeff McKenna, Council Member Andrew Nagel, and Council Member John Chase. And so I'm going to call on Vice Mayor McKenna to give us a report on what the committee has come up with. Jeff?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, as Patrick mentioned, we put this committee together basically because the price increase that occurred in the last quote caused all of us to sit back and put a pause on this. And we put a committee together, have worked very diligently the last couple months. Couple things we've done, had some side discussions with Withers Ravenel and Save the Ivy. We had a question and answer session last week that a lot of people attended with Trent Duncan and Dale Pennell from Public Works, just on specific questions and gaps, quite frankly, that we had in our water usage. And that was very helpful. And then we've also looked at the engineering studies that have been done, 3 of them really over a number of years in the background. And so we're prepared tonight to make 3 specific recommendations. No action is going to take place tonight. What we're advocating is that we take action on these 3 things at the next council meeting, which is next Monday. And one thing I did want to, add to Patrick's thank you to both groups that have spoken. Withers Ravenel has done a great job, great partner with us, looking at our different needs, which have changed as we've gone. And then the Save the Ivy River group, James, you guys have brought a very good voice to things that we need to look at, because we have to be stewards for the resource as well as take care of the water users. So there's 3 key things that I want to highlight, and then we can save Q&A for at the end. One of them, number 1, is around short-term improvements to the water treatment plant, which we talked about last week with Trent and company. We are recommending that we move ahead aggressively on those short-term improvements, and I'll call it hardening of the facility, within 6 months, pending, of course, grant monies and capital. One of the things we heard loud and clear last week from Trent, he's been asking for these for several years. And these are things that keep him up at night, things like generators for backup, redundant systems, moving to a more efficient chemical system. And, we really need this facility to always be world-class and safe and efficient all the time, regardless of whether we move ahead with an expansion or not. While we've been looking at this expansion for the last couple of years, his requests have been rolled into that. But what we're recommending now is let's split those out. Let's look at the funding, whether it's a combination of capital reserves or rescue plan funds, grant monies, et cetera. And then at the next council meeting, make a motion to move ahead with those. In parallel, we want to look at other efficiencies that we can be gained in the existing facility, which we ought to be doing all the time, as Save the Ivy River Group just mentioned a moment ago. So that's number 1. Number 2 is a regional concept for water and for the water treatment facility. this is not a new idea that the three of us cooked up. It's actually something that's been in play for years. Selena, the town manager, and Al Root, the former mayor, had been informally working with some of the other municipalities about regionalization. If you go back 8 years ago, there was a Ivy River Watershed Source Protection Plan and by the way, all my comments and the data and the research that we've done after the meeting tonight, we'll give this to Jennifer, and this will all get posted online. But there was a study done a number of years ago, and one of the specific things they mentioned, and I'll read from it, is that the towns of Weaverville and Mars Hill, Madison, and Buncombe County soil and water conservation districts should consider developing and keeping up to date a cooperative agreement for working together on the watershed. So, you know, the facts are, this is much bigger than a Weaverville challenge, and it has been for years. Today, 80% of the area that the water treatment plant covers is outside of Weaverville's boundaries, and 30% of the users of the actual water meters are outside town borders. And that's going to keep growing because honestly, even if we build out the rest of Weaverville inside the borders, that would only be about an 850 more users under current zoning, which is about 180,000, 200,000 gallons a day. So with the current Weaverville footprint, we're not going to bump up against the maximum of this facility. But when you start to look at all the other regional stakeholders, Madison County, Buncombe County, Marshall, Mars Hill, they are really the future of this. And we need to be working with them in any kind of move we're making. One important thing for people to realize, this is also not a Weaverville taxpayer issue. All the money and all the funding of the water treatment plant is funded by the water users. If you're a Weaverville taxpayer and you're a water user, great, but that doesn't apply to all. So this is really a water treatment user opportunity and issue moving forward. So up till now, we've been doing all the management of this facility has been by Trent and his team with Dale's oversight. They've done a fantastic job. Occasionally, Weaverville Town Council gets involved in things like this, but we really haven't had formal involvement from outside of the town. And we think this is long overdue. If you look at other organizations in the region, like the MSD Sewer, or even the Asheville Airport, they are regional facilities. They have boards with people with that are in different stakeholders in the community. It's not just the area where they sit. And we should look at adopting a structure like that. So what we're proposing at the next meeting to vote on is forming a committee to look at the possibility of regionalization of the water treatment plant in our water strategy moving forward. So we form a committee, we look at the feasibility of a regional water authority, look at all these different stakeholders that we've already mentioned, including Friends of the Ivy, Land of Sky, areas of NCDEQ. And we expect this process to probably take 6 to 9 months. It could be that we come out the other side with a recommendation for a new structure. It could be it just validates the structure we're on, but we think this is long overdue. So the third area is what we really started with, which is expansion, water treatment expansion. What we're recommending is that we delay an expansion while we consider both of these, number 1 and 2, the regionalization and the short-term improvements, and delay it for 6 to 9 months or longer as needed. We are not in a position where we're going to run out of water anytime soon for Weaverville's needs. We've already talked about that. So it's not a capacity issue in the near term. We don't know what the impact of the price rises in the expansion is going to be, if that's going to moderate or go down. We're hopeful that's going to go down. So this is something that we don't feel we need to move on just now. But when we do, we need to do it with a broader regional group. The $13 million cost that came in at the last go around was really just too much for us to justify going ahead at this time by ourselves. And any kind of future development, by the way, that's going to happen outside of our borders is really going to happen with or without Weaverville. People do have options, other options on water. And so even though development is tied into this, it's really not an outgrowth of these decisions. So again, at the next meeting, what we're proposing is delay an expansion of the current water treatment plant indefinitely, anticipate 6 to 9 months or longer, depending on the results of the regional discussion. And then also consider any potential impacts on near-term development requests that we have for the town outside our borders. So we want to be very careful, very tactical about those requests. We're not proposing a moratorium on that, but we're just obviously requesting that we be very, very careful like we are today. And I just want to thank all the hard work that Andrew and John have put into this and all the other folks that have supported us. So with that, Patrick, I'm going to turn it back over to you and Jennifer.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the very thoughtful report. We appreciate that. Next, I'm going to ask for any questions from other council members, and then we're going to go to public comment. We want to hear questions from the public as well. And just to go over that, the process, again, if you want to ask a question or have a comment, take your cursor to the bottom of your screen, hit the reactions icon, and then hit the raise your hand option. And Jennifer will do her best to manage this process. And when you have a question, if you could direct it to someone in particular, that might make this process easier. And keep in mind, we've got, you may have a question specifically for the engineers at Withers Ravenel. You may have a question specifically from the Save the Ivy group with James Heinel. And you may have questions for our committee through Jeff McKenna, Andrew, and John. So. And also keep in mind that our subject matter experts from Weaverville are online as well. That includes Dale Pennell, our Public Works Director, and Trent Duncan, our Water Treatment Plant Supervisor. I believe they're both on here. So anyway, if you could direct your question to a specific individual, it'll make the process go simpler. But before we get to that, I wanted to call on council members and ask if they had any questions of the 3 presenters we have heard from so far. Council members? Catherine?
I would like to ask the question of, when Trent asked for the possibility of the basin being recoded, is there any way that that can be done? Or do we need to build a new basin so that that can be done? And could that be, what is the cost of something like that? And could it be something that we move forward on this short-term improvements?
Trent, I can't see you, but are you on here?
Yeah, I'm on here.
Okay.
That'd be quite the undertaking and still be able to provide the amount of water needed. Due to having to drain a basin for multiple days, it'd have to be drain them down, it'd have to be dry for multiple days. So at that time, we wouldn't be able to run. It would definitely have to be at a time in the year to where we weren't needing as much water in the system. But at the same time, that's counterproductive to a lot of coatings because that's going to be your colder time of year. I do believe that estimate in the PER was around $240,000 to have those reworked and coated, is what was in the most recent in the plant expansion PER.
So Ken, could you or Joe give me a rough estimate of what a brand new basin on the other side would cost that could hook in? And then we would have 2 basins, one that was new, one that was in the process of being recoated.
I can probably speak to that. There's a couple of different ways to do it. The actual cost, I don't have it right in front of me, but you're probably, for For the concrete costs are very variable right at the moment. To go back to what Trent was saying, some of the issues that you run into trying to coat a basin, you've got a very well-designed plant where you can run 2 trains right now. But when you take one out of service, sometimes there's leakage through that common wall in between the 2 of them. And trying to dry that up so you can put the coatings on can be a real challenge. I can't give you that. I'd rather not give you that number right off the top, but I can have it for you tomorrow to let you know what it would be and kind of a sketch for what you would do. If that's the only thing that you're adding, we'd put it in one location. If it's part of a future expansion, we'd put it in the location that's shown right now.
Okay. Thank
I would
you.
just like, and I'm just going to add to that, when you have a basin that comes with all the appurtenances of electrical controls and mixers and flocculator and all the other kind of mechanical equipment. So I don't want to oversimplify and just say it's a basin as much as it is. It's still an official treatment process that has all the appurtenances and appropriate equipment in it.
And I think I understand that, but I do believe that this is our one facility. And in order to keep it state of the art, like Jeff said, if we cannot coat the one that's there without going down for a long period of time, then to me, the only option would be to put in a brand new one. And I would probably go ahead and put it in right where we would if we were going to expand. Because even if we don't expand this year or next year, in 8 to 10 years, that's probably something we're going to have to do. So I would like that quote if possible. And I do understand that it can be very expensive, but I also, if we had the other one coated, could they not run, 4 days on this one, 4 days on that one and keep running them both? That would be another question I guess I would have.
You could certainly stagger the operation and that would work well. And I can get you that quote. I'll get it to Ken and Casey, and they'll have it to Trent and Dale tomorrow, so you can take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Thank you. The hand reaction is not on my list of 6 options, so I'm using it old school way. So my question is, can we get Withers Ravenel to verify where the water gauge flow is taken from?
Yeah, that is from a standard USGS website. That's the location I can pull the exact coordinates from, but that was just the nearest location to the plant.
Okay, and that is downstream from the intake, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Again, it was just the nearest USGS gauge, and and speaking to all the other type of studies and stuff, the macroinvertebrate, I mean, it wasn't that we didn't do it. It's just additional cost because it's not required by the state. We rely on the state to do those reviews. Communities don't voluntarily do those studies. Should the state require it? And they typically don't require those unless you go under the 20% at the 7Q10. Which is the lowest flow possible. So it's not that we didn't do them; it's just that it was an additional cost, and we just didn't see the need for the additional cost.
Andrew?
So I followed proper procedure and got skipped. Question. I wanted to piggyback on what Catherine had asked, which was a terrific question. Thank you, Catherine. And I don't expect an answer tonight. But the fundamental question is, what do facilities do that aren't remotely ever going to expand because they don't need to? How do they fix a basin that's worn out? So I don't want an answer tonight by any means. So we can't be the only facility that needs a basin fixed. And I don't believe it's tied to expanding. So no answer. It's really not a question. It's a statement. So, and then since John chimed in, second statement, not a question, is, yeah, the state they're great politicians, and I deal with the state all the time. To take a reading, and no blame on Withers Ravenel. This has nothing to do with Withers Ravenel. To take a reading 9 miles down the river with 5 tributaries coming into it, well, doesn't make sense to me. In my, in my common sense, to and it's because it was there. That's where the measuring devices are. So it's the wrong place to measure it for our intake, and that's just the facts. And what the state thinks is, the state's the state, and don't have a lot of confidence in them anyway. So thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other council members have questions for any of our experts here? Doug?
Yeah, one element which is not with the engineering, but I've mentioned this before, is the fact of the state requiring us on any kind of unit that's put in to allocate 400 gallons per day. Now, I did a little bit of checking, and the reference to that 400 gallons a day seems to come from a report that was done by the Department of Agriculture and published in April 2000, but its data was taken from 1994 to 1996. And at that time, we didn't have the water efficient things we have now. As I think Trent said, we're using half that much, maybe 200 gallons a day. And we're being charged, as far as plant expansion, with having to come up with something when we reach a certain percentage based on 400 gallons per day. So I don't know. I know it's a long shot, but I think the state is completely out of it. And I don't know whether or not we could get other towns that may be facing this or not, but I think that standard should be changed. That would certainly delay requirements for expansion.
Yes, actually, Doug, if I remember correctly, Dale told us last week that the average consumption in Weaverville is only about 100 gallons per household, and for apartments, even less, I think like 70. So we're having to allocate 3 to 4 times as much as we're actually using for residences. Any other council members have questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, I'd like to open up the public too and have the public ask questions or give us their comments on this important issue for Weaverville. And Jennifer, I'm going to rely on you to be the Zoom master here and make sure we stay on target and make sure we try and capture everyone's interest who has an interest in speaking.
All right. The first I'm going to ask is Aaliyah Tuttle.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thanks. I just kind of want to piggyback on some of the things you guys said about not having a lot of confidence on what the state is considering the standards, and also wanted to mention that in addition to this data that we have about the flow in the river being taken downstream, we also want to consider that this downstream flow requirement or limit was evaluated in 1993, so set in the 90s by the state, and a lot's happened since then in the watershed, and in terms of flow, in terms of trends with drought, in terms of land use, and I don't know if it's necessarily going to protect wildlife and deserves more attention. The other question I had was with the discharge of the washing of the filters. I know that there's like a registered discharge permit that talked about needing to probably update with additional water use in processing. And I'm just wondering, under low flow conditions, if you're taking out 50% of the water during the lowest flow condition, if it's still safe to discharge that much more waste from the filters under low flow conditions, like if that permit would allow you to essentially double your waste discharge and upstream from your intake. So I mean, that's a scenario you might want to consider, and they might, I don't know, might come into play sooner than you might expect. I don't know. So the next thing is with the environmental review, the environmental assessment document. If you're going to apply for USDA funding, there's this, she mentioned There's Ravenel mentioned that there's going to be a public notice that goes out and to all the agencies for that. And you'll need to assess the cumulative impacts to this withdrawal, including the town expansion that might be allowed if there's more water withdrawn, if you're able to expand your town limits, have more water customers and have more urbanization, more impervious surface, that's going to impact the watersheds of Reams Creek. And they're going to ask you to probably look at those impacts as well. If you expand the plant and if that allows you to expand the town, that's like a cumulative impact. And so, yeah, I agree so much that there needs to be regional watershed planning with this. Thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you very much, Aaliyah. Now your questions regarding the discharge, I think Trent's probably the best equipped to answer that question. Trent, can you answer a question about that?
I can kind of answer that. Currently, we don't have a discharge limit per se. We average about 13,000 gallons a day of discharge. We do not necessarily discharge every day, but and also our filter washes that she was speaking of, we do approximately one filter wash every 4 to 5 days. It's a little longer in the summer, and that water does not just directly go back to the river. We treat that water under our NPDES permit. That water has to have all chlorine removed. That water is tested before any water is released back. It goes into the river, and it's actually a lot cleaner than the river water itself as far as total and fecal coliforms. We've removed a whole lot of that stuff from it. And it goes into our waste basin, settles out. We take the clean water off the top that is tested to all the state requirements, and it goes back to the river at that point. And then the solids, as some of you have heard, we have a company come in every year. Since we can't take those solids to MSD anymore, we have a third-party company come in. They bring in a belt press. We pump the sludge out. They press it and take the solids to Buncombe County landfill, and they use it as cover in the landfill.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I see Andrew. Do you have a question before we go forward?
Thanks. Quick question for Trent, and I had forgot. And I back to the basin. And again, I appreciate Catherine bringing that up. Trent, did an engineer or anybody give us estimate on how much time you need before you need to coat the current basin? How much longer is this one good for?
We haven't had a direct estimate on lifespan of the current basin. We can just all, you can physically see that more issues, as you have seeps and you have freeze and thaw, it just amplifies the aging process of any type of concrete. And I will say we have, started to have to spend a little more money on them. We spent about $12,000 in the last couple months having some repairs done on it. We also spent about 3 or 4 years ago, about $25,000 to $30,000 on having some repairs done for major cracking that was above the water line, but it was causing structural issues.
Great. Thank you, Trent. Jennifer?
John Bowen had his hand up a minute ago, but I don't see it up now.
Well, thank you. Mr. Nagel just asked the question that I was going to ask. So I'm going to sit down and maybe raise my hand again in a minute on a different issue.
Andrew, you're so prescient. Jennifer?
Jeremy Diner.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my name is Jeremy Diner. I am a property owner in Weaverville. And I guess my main question right now is if the council decides to delay this decision for 6-9 months, like you're discussing, would you consider doing a more thorough risk assessment of the potential risks and benefits of the Asheville water pass-through plan? Because I think Trent has some very valid concerns, but I also think that the likelihood of actually ever using the pass-through is very low. And so I would request or would like to know if the council would be more interested in doing more thorough risk assessment on that.
I think that was one of the options that Jeff mentioned in his report, that yes, that would be one of the things that we want to take a look at and get more data on. Am I speaking correctly, Jeff?
Yeah, the idea would be look at anything and everything as options. From what I've heard in other past meetings, you know, connecting into and using asphalt water is not simply patching a pipe in, throwing some PVC in there and away you go. It's not a trivial thing, but yeah, we should look at everything very carefully. And the key thing is we shouldn't feel the pressure of time pushing on us. Let's do the right thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
I don't see anybody else with their hand up.
Amazing.
Oh, hang on. 1, 2. Let's see, John Bowen.
Thank you. I'm John Bowen at 50 North College in Weaverville. This question is addressed to the subcommittee on the water plant. Jeff McKenna said at the end, when he was thinking about that it was time for us to investigate a regional water authority as opposed to treating this like Weaverville's water. And my concern is that at the very end of the meeting last week, there was a comment that someone threw out. I don't know who said it, but what they said was basically that control of this water is how we control our development. And I think that's been a common thread through Weaverville's recent history, is that water is intimately tied to development. And if we rush to form a regional water commission that then treats the water as a broadly held resource, do we run the risk of losing that control of the water in terms of our development? And this is especially important because we've lost our extraterritorial jurisdiction. We've already lost control of our development there. And what I wonder is, perhaps, would it be possible, if this regional water commission comes into effect, to somehow get the county on our side and swap a regional water commission for return of our ETJ? Because I don't want to see us lose that control of our borders. And I wonder if there's some political horse trading that might happen there. Thank you.
Well, I'll take the risk. I'll take the risk of answering that as best as I can, John. Yes, if we turned over administration of our water treatment plant to some regional board, then yes, there would be some loss of influence or control that the town of Weaver would have. Yes. And if there's a possibility of political horse trading, there's always that kind of that possibility. Andrew, you have to say as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to attribute who the quote was really from, and it was from a document that Jeff or John found from Larry Sprinkle. So it's the last paragraph in this public document written in 2012 that who the water treatment facility is actually named after. Is that. And the second quick thing to, and you may not know this, John, the state of North Carolina, not Buncombe County. So the state legislature took the ETJ from Asheville and lumped Weaverville in with it. And so we are the only, I think I'm right, but if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. I think we're the only 2 cities in the state of North Carolina that lost the ETJ when the state legislature did that. So if we want to, what'd you say, Catherine?
Boone.
Boone did also.
Boone as well. Okay, a few, and yeah, if we can work with the state to get the ETJ back, I agree with you. And if we can't, I think we've talked as a greater council to what Patrick was saying, is we need to collaborate better with Buncombe County zoning, because on Aiken Road, on the other side of 26, 1,000 apartments are going in, and they're getting their water from Woodfin, and they're doing it in 3 stages. So they're not in a town at all. They're in the county, but they border the town of Weaverville, very much so. So without collaboration with the county and without an ETJ and zoning, there's going to be a lot of issues. So really good question.
Absolutely.
John, if I could add into that, it's a great question, a valid point. Honestly, we could do a world-class job forever on managing it and the footprint. And all these other entities out there could one day wake up and say, you know, we're not really confident Weaverville knows what they're doing about water. We're going to form a regional commission anyway and build a new plant. So, you know, some of this is somewhat proactive to just have those discussions. And again, we're not advocating that we necessarily regionalize it. We're saying, let's go have the discussion. Let's get the people in a room and start looking at it seriously. That may occur or it may not, but right now we've been, it's kind of been like a science project in the background. And, you know, this cost increases kind of gave us an impetus to say, let's go and look at that.
Thank you all. So I think that Jennifer has been so good at Zoom that I can actually see who has their hands up already. So I believe that Chuck Thornton would be next. Chuck?
Yes, I just have a question about the process discharges. Now, I wanted to clarify, and Trent probably would be the best one to answer. These process discharges aren't. These things are over several hours time, I suspect. You know that, so that we're not. You know the amount of disturbance that the downstream and the aquatic life would be exposed to is minimal at best.
I can answer that. Yes, usually it's over a 2-3 hour period or even more. What happened, like I said a few minutes ago, we have to test to make sure there's no chlorine, make sure the pH is in the appropriate range. And then we slowly discharge back to the river because we're not allowed to stir up more than 50 units of turbidity, which is the dirt particles in the water. Basically looks like mud. We have to keep that to a minimum as well because that's one of the standards that we have to follow. So no, we're not doing anything at all to harm. At our discharge pipe, there's always tons of crayfish and other things right at our discharge pipe. So the health of that stream going back into the Ivy is a very healthy stream.
Thank you, Chuck and Trent. Will Harlan?
Hey everyone, I'm Will Harlan. I'm the executive director of Friends of Big Ivy. Don't want to confuse anyone with Save Ivy River. We wholeheartedly support Save Ivy River sentiments and endorsements. Friends of Big Ivy is focused on the headwaters of the Ivy River. We're primarily based up in the Barnardsville area, but we have over 3,000 members and supporters across the region. And we want to applaud the council and Jeff McKenna's recommendations for regionalization. We think that's a proactive and smart strategic approach to take the time necessary to investigate this option. And Friends of Big Ivy would be happy to participate and help in any way possible. We have a broad network of local folks who have been involved in water and forest related issues for almost a decade now, and would be eager to help any way we can, but definitely want to applaud and support the regionalization proposal put forth. Thanks.
Thank you, Will. Jim Tibbetts?
Yeah, I've got a question for the engineers, and that is this. On the mean gauge height on the Ivy River withdrawal slide of the presentation that was shown earlier, it gauges the mean gauge height from a period of August 14th to October 9th. Do you think that's adequate? And shouldn't that be done over a period of years that would reflect dry years and wet years in order to accurately estimate that?
So I need to be clear. That was not a scientific study. That is not done. That was done in response to the Save the Ivy direct questionnaire. Council, that was done as a reference point for the council to have a decision. You know, that was not a sanctioned study. That was done, something that was purely done for reference so that the council could understand the negligible impact of truly what that kind of withdrawal is. And I mean, these withdrawals are governed by the state. Now I heard everyone, you know, with the state. And so in this In this case, it is convenient for everyone to say the state isn't quite qualified. But on the flip side, when you look at the cumulative impact that somebody spoke to earlier, for some reason, that's the part of the state that is reviewing that cumulative impact, they are qualified. But when it comes to the state's decision on the impact to the river, they're not. I agree with all of them. I'm playing by the rules that are laid out in front of me. And so with respect, if Weaverville was made of money, trust me, I love data. I would love to have a gauge there, but that cost of that gauge to be maintained on an annual, to be installed, it has to be permitted. You're talking $100 grand just to install it. Then you're talking thousands of dollars a year in additional maintenance, posting the data to the web, and then the analysis. So I am not opposed to any of this, but that's kind of the reality.
You say it's the in the government's role to define this, but the council members are going to use this poor data to make their decision. And then when the government comes back later, as they did here in Marshall with the asphalt plant, and say, well, that data wasn't really correct at all. Here's the new data. The council members have no more decision-making power. So when you put out poor data like this, and you know it is, there should be an study, and it's an existing gauge. Is it not? We're not asking you to put it in a new gauge. You should be looking at records that exist before you throw out a slide that makes it seem like this is going to be minimal impact. This is not accurate, and you're giving a false impression about the impact of this plant. This mean gauge height is almost useless data. How can you justify that?
Because I used the entire data set that was available from the USGS gauge from the day that period was installed. The picture you're looking at is just a screen capture of the data. When you look at the data over the entire time period from when the gauge was installed, you lose the point of it. So that was simply a picture that explains the information. It's into a consumable way.
2-year snapshot, is it not? From this same, is there not 2 years that are on that slide from the same date, August to October? So what you make it sound like this gauge was installed and just for a couple months, and that's the only amount of time you had to measure the mean gauge height? That doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain that?
No, I'm not gonna get into it now, because I mean, should the council wish to, and sir, please let me finish. Should the council wish to engage in a full-blown stream study at that point, we are happy to do it. We are happy to install gauges. And
you don't need a full-blown. I just want this one question answered. How did you arrive at this mean gauge height? Because it seemed like poor analysis to me. It seems like you didn't use adequate data. You didn't take the drier months into account. It seems so. I'm curious, like how you arrived at that. And I would love to.
You're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion, and I understand. Should the council wish to engage further, then I'm happy to do that.
Jim, thank you for your questions. I think Ken's answered as best he can your answer to your question. Catherine, you have a comment or a question?
I did want to talk about the fact that, just for everyone on to hear, I do think that for us to investigate the possibility of a regional team is a good thing. But I also want everybody to understand that has been done in the past. And so, Jeff, I know you haven't been here since 1990, but in 1990s, when this original plant was put together, there was a regional team, and people from Woodfin and Mars Hill were part of it. And at that time, after all the analysis was done, when it came time to build the plant on the Ivy River, they chose not to participate because A, they had water they could get to, or B, they didn't have money, or C, both. And so I do think that it's highly possible that over the next 6 months, when we reach out and we try to form a regional team, it very well could be that Mars Hill would say, we're happy with the water system that we have, and we don't have any money to give you. And it could be that Woodfin says, we're now happy with the water system that we're getting from Asheville, and we don't have any money to give you. And so our region is still probably going to be us. And at that time, we can decide you know, if it may even be possible, and I should just go ahead and say this now, but, you know, why would we have a relationship where we commit ourselves to holding a bunch of water that somebody might need instead of somebody really needs? And so it could be that there's a possibility of us pushing out the water plant expansion because we say this is the water that we have and the capacity that we have. And then we do get to decide how far we grow. And it seems like everybody wants to grow here for some reason, right outside of our borders. That's one thing I wanted to talk about and just to mention.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Ken, do you have your hands up? Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I just want to add that Mars Hill is actually just wrapping up. Marshall and Mars Hill are just wrapping up a regional study right now for an interconnect. That was done, and actually the money was allocated in the state budget for an interconnect between Mars Hill and Marshall. It was about $12 million that was allocated for that interconnect.
Excellent. Good information. Thank you. Roger Cordell. Roger, you still there? Okay, so I think Roger may have gone to the bathroom.
No, I think he was trying to flip his.
Roger, I'm going to go on to another call, but I'll be glad to come back to you. Sarah Murphy.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to chime in based on what Councilwoman Cordell was saying in terms of, I actually recently did a story for the Mountain Express on this issue. And I ended up talking to Representative Mark Pless, who I believe represents, among other counties, Madison County. He was very interested in what's potentially going to go on and definitely wants to be part of the discussions. I also wanted to mention, having spoken briefly to the project manager of Ivy River Partners, they have recently hired an aquatic biologist to start doing studies of aquatic life and essentially to get a baseline. So I think one of the challenges that you all will have going forward is that they're essentially getting a baseline of the health of the river now, and you won't really be able to compare, at least when it comes to aquatic life, too much from previous years. But that would probably be another, I came on late to the call, so if these organizations or people have already been mentioned, I apologize, but just wanted to point out that there's a whole range of stakeholders really interested in this. And yeah, I think that study would be of interest to everyone. Early results are coming forward, but again, it is essentially a baseline looking to understand the health of the river as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And yes, Mark Plus has been in touch with me, and the other groups you mentioned have been speaking this evening. So thank you. Are there any other questions from the public? I don't see any hands raised, Jennifer. Am I missing something?
Andrew's got his hand up.
Andrew?
Patrick, before you do a closing comment, we get all the public comment. I just want to make one small statement just wanted to get that in before you do a closing.
Okay, now, or you want to wait?
If there's no more public comment now, is fine.
It looks like John Bowen has his hand raised now as well. So John?
May I ask an additional question?
Yes.
This is for the engineering firm. In the PER, there's a graph showing the projected water usage, and it shows the 80% and the 90% points at which we trigger important actions on expanding the plant. And what I see there is if we don't make additional commitments to Madison or to Mars Hill, that the actual trigger point, the 80% point where something has to start happening, is out about 10 years in the future. And what I'm wondering is if those projections of when this happens is based on the 400 gallons a day per meter that the state is using, or is it based on an extension of our actual town use, which we've all agreed is quite a bit lower? And is that extension then just based on population growth and infill? Because it looks like if we don't make additional commitments to Mars Hill, the decision point here can be pushed out quite a ways without any impact on our water supply. So can you tell me what kind of numbers were used to get the projected growth on that? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And Dale, you're probably best equipped to answer that. You have to unmute yourself, Dale.
And I would defer to Casey, who actually helped develop that graph. She's probably more, and Dale can absolutely chime in.
Okay. Dale, you want to start, and then Casey, please jump in.
Let's go in reverse since it's Casey's graph that John's asking about.
All right, Casey, you're up.
Casey at bat. So that actual projection has a little bit of both lumped in, to be honest. So in order to project forward, we have to use the state's requirements for those usage per day, but we also factor in what the plant's already producing. So we take what it's producing, which is current, what Weaverville is actually using on a day-to-day basis, and then based on the developments that you have coming forward, based on your historical projections, we look forward and see what that may be, what those flows might be using the state's required numbers. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't predict the future that well, which is why you see kind of a range. Usually for these types of projections, we work with the town to see where they're looking at, where they know growth is going to happen. We look at historical numbers to say, this is what your growth is. Looking back and looking at a few different things, not only growth of Weaverville, but also looking at Asheville and how that compares with the county itself, because we're trying to narrow down what we think these projections are going to be. Will that happen? We don't know. As we saw in 2008, a lot of those developments that we were planning for turned down. So again, I can't predict the future, the next pandemic or whatnot, but for the best available data that we had of how Weaverville has grown in the last 10, 20 years, and then also taking into account some buffer of what the surrounding areas have done, that's what that projection shows.
And I just want to add one thing that you have to remember, we're 2 years into this process now. And, and we're currently, 3 to 4 years away from actually putting this online. So when you say it's 10 years away, that's not very far when it comes, that's not that long when you're talking a, 5, 6, 7 year process of what it takes to actually get the expansion functional to the point where you can turn something on. So that's why we're doing the planning now, so that, so that you're not cutting it close during that time frame. Dale, I'm not sure if you have anything to add for that.
The only other thing that I'd like to add is I've been quarterly presenting reports to town council with projections of our current water commitments, as well as our average metered and unmetered town usage and our average unaccounted for water on a daily basis. And those numbers, those are hard numbers that we're able to pull from our records as far as our current usage. And as Mr. Bowen correctly mentioned, the projections for future development, whether that's infill development or whether that's existing meters in town that have been, they're no longer in use, but could be turned back on, and projected out of town residential units. They are based on the 400 gallons per day that the state requires us to use for design documents for water extensions and for those developments. But I want to make sure that you understand that the 400 gallons per day is used during the design process for those units. Once the unit is completed, then the 400 gallons per day comes off of the commitment list and becomes whatever the usage is through the meter that they're buying the water. Okay. So where we say that a residential development with 10 homes, we commit 4,000 gallons to them. But then as soon as those homes actually have meters, then they move from the commitment list to the actual demand list. So what I'm trying to make sure we understand is that we project at a higher rate, but actual usage is at a lower rate. And so trying to make sure that we don't artificially say that we're using water that that we don't have, that 400 versus the average of 100 sort of gives us a little bit of a pad in that time period leading up to the 80% number.
Thank you. I think that's an important clarification, Dale. I do not see any other hands raised. Jennifer, do you?
I do not.
Pardon me, Catherine?
Me again.
Catherine again.
So the thing that Roger handed me, because somehow his voice wasn't working on his computer, was when Ken had spoke, he did give us two options. And the options were we either expand or we start restricting water to, and we don't want to get into being regulators of water, you know? And so when Roger and I were kids growing up, that was the problem in Weaverville, is that it was regulated, it was restricted, and you couldn't do anything. You couldn't play in the water, you couldn't wash your car, you couldn't water your lawn. So we never ever want to get back into those again. So I know we may not want to expand tomorrow or next year, but it is something we have to think about for the future, and it will happen in our lifetimes for everybody who's sitting here. And so I know that there are people who think that town council is only out there talking about water, 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 but guys, we all have to have water. Our bodies are made of water. We're made of, you know, so we have to, in the next 6 months, we will work diligently to find alternatives of ways, I'm sure.
Thank you, Catherine. Anyone else? Jeremy?
Thank you. Just really briefly, I would like to mention that efficiency is about technology. Conservation is about behavior. And conservation should be absolutely reserved for drought and not be used as a policy decision whatsoever. But efficiency is about changing out technology and shouldn't have anything to do with telling people how they should behave. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sarah Murphy?
Yes, I just had a quick question, which I'm not sure anyone can be able to answer, but it applies to what you had just said recently, Dale. I'm just wondering, thinking about the state's guidelines, and I know we've talked about how accurate they may or may not be, but I guess a question that came up when you were talking about, you know, we design for 400 gallons a day, even though we don't necessarily use that much. I'm just wondering how much more money and investment it takes to design for 400 gallons a day versus if you were able to design for fewer gallons, you know, something closer to actual usage, like 200 gallons a day. So I'm, you know, whether or not, in my mind, and I'm not an engineer, I think, oh, does that mean that design is automatically going to be, for instance, double the cost because it has to, you know, account for double the whatever? Probably not, but, you know, a question of how much more is there a greater expense in designing for, you know, perhaps an inaccurate or inflated amount of gallons per day?
Want to give that a shot, Dale?
Well, the easiest way for me to do it is say that the smaller number that we've seen in analyzing the actual meter usage by our customers is exactly what I said. It's an average. Mm-hmm. And we have some folks that are single individuals living alone in a home, and their usage can be much, much less than a full household of folks who may very well use the 400 gallons per day. So it's an average, but the state, I think, in using their good judgment, is basing what we want to design for, so that we don't end up with being pushed up against their 80 or 90% limit artificially, is to use a number that that protects the public and protects our customers, while still allowing us plenty of time to be able to effect the change that might be needed.
Dale, I've been doing this too long. I've been in the water business and designing and working with the state of North Carolina for a little over 41 years. This 400 gallons per day per service has been in place a long time, and there's a lot of reasons for it. When you're designing infrastructure, as Ken said, this water plant is a 5 to 7 year plan from when you start talking about it until you can actually get water from it. When you're designing infrastructure, this 400 gallons per day not only pertains to the water treatment plant, it pertains to the line size that goes to these houses. It pertains to the pumping systems that you have. And if you undersize these in the initial design of the project, it's very expensive to go back and parallel lines, to go back and replace infrastructure. And so the state has as a guideline this 400 gallons per day to make sure that we don't undersize it. From an engineering standpoint, we don't look at Weaverville and say, you're only using 100 gallons per day per service. You don't need a 6-inch line, you need a 3-inch line. So we as engineers don't undersize any of the infrastructure. As Dale said, once you get the systems online, if you're using 135 gallons per day per service and we're doing projections, then you take your population or your number of services and times 135, and that's what you use. That's what you use in planning. But this infrastructure design, that's where that 400 gallons per day per service comes into bearing.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thomas Veazey?
Yeah, just want to ask about, we keep kicking around the state has antiquated old data for the water usage, this 80 to 90% deal with all the modern technology we have. Is there any steps here or anything we're doing to put pressure on our local constituents, representatives, to reanalyze this and update this data so that with all the modern technology we have on saving water at our spigots and the toilets and everything else we use, to lower and reevaluate this and make those thresholds different? I mean, we keep talking about it, but nobody's saying going back to the state and putting it back on their lap.
Let me answer that. Let me jump in real quick. Good question. Let's not confuse infrastructure, underbuilding infrastructure. Nobody's suggesting that. And if you read the history of the Weaverville water, they did that repeatedly. They had to put in bigger main lines. That's not the problem. And Ken's point of I'm picking and choosing when I want to listen to the state, I'm not going to listen to them when they're wrong. Okay, they're not always right because they're the state. The 400, to use it for your allocation, to say if you get to the 80% threshold, is just wrong. Okay, it has nothing to do with infrastructure. They shouldn't use the same data to tell us, oh my God, the sky is falling, panic, we're running out of water. I'm going to give you a number, and this will blow your mind. I've given this number before. Okay, we're using 48% of what the plant can do. That leaves 800,000 gallons in the existing plant. And the average single family in Weaverville uses 100. That's 8,000 more homes. Homes. How many homes are in Weaverville? Okay. There's only 4,000 registered voters. There's 3,000 taps. That's almost 3 times. So we're saying the town of Weaverville is going to grow at a rate of 3 times. We're going to triple in size in the next 10 years. I'm not buying that. Whoever's selling that, I'm not buying that. Okay. That's not happening. We're not going to run out of water, period, in the next 10 years. Okay. And to the point is, we don't have to sell it to people outside of the town. And Jeff pointed out much earlier in the conversation that the infill isn't even close to that. And I need to apologize. Doug Jackson and Patrick and I were on council in 2017. And I really am sorry we voted on this, because we took the data we were given and I think we made a terrible decision. We didn't do this committee. In the 6 years I've been on council, we've never looked into a topic this hard, which is great. I am so proud of this current council and what they're trying to accomplish. But we took a shortcut in 2017 and we didn't need water then. We panicked, and we panicked because the state requires Dale, not in infrastructure, in how much of our facility we're going to run out of water. That's a crock. Okay. It's a crock. We wrote John Egger and Brian Turner and asked them to change it, and we got no response back. They didn't even answer the letter that Al sent them. Okay. So this is at the state legislature level, that for our threshold of when to panic is wrong data. End of story. It's just wrong data. Nothing to do with how big a 6-inch pipe or a 12-inch pipe or what engineers say we need. So I'll stop on that, but we're not running out of water in 10 years. To go 8,000 homes, that's the real number. That's math. Simple high school algebra.
Okay, thank you.
One more quick question is, are we going to read the comments that we got in through email? I know some people emailed questions and comments, and are we going to read those?
So I just asked James, and he wasn't aware of any. I know Mr. Bueller is on the line. His comments, his emailed letter went to everybody, I believe, and I think it exceeded the limits.
Okay, so apparently there's no others. And we're going to draw this to a close. I see Chuck Thornton has his hand raised, and if no one else has questions, Chuck, you'll be the kicker here.
Yeah, my remark is that, look at the demographics. I mean, right now, we're looking at what I don't recall offhand, but 60% of the population of Weaverville is over 60 years old, maybe something like that. You look at these apartments that are going up. Yes, we will have a lot of growth that we have not seen in the previous 10 years. I guarantee it. And as far as the demand for water, that ship's already sailed. These people who are outside the city limits and are on our service will continue to be on our service. We're not going to cut them loose and put them in have them start drilling wells.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Okay, Megan Taylor, I see you raise your hand. Here's your chance.
Yes, I did. I just want to make sure I submitted a comment, and so did my husband, Joseph D. Santola. So I hope that those are included in the town council's packages. And it's more about consideration of what does the town of Weaverville, the residents, because this was developed for Weaverville, this water system was developed for Weaverville, what do the people in the town want to do with respect to their water system and the development it portends for us? And I just would like to have you all consider that and read the comments that we submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. We did get those, and thank you very much. So I think we've been at this almost 2 hours. I really appreciate everyone's participation this evening. This is an important issue for all of us. And just a reminder that our next regular council meeting is next Monday night, the 24th. There will be another opportunity for public input at that point, and there may well be a motion to take some action as well. So 6 p.m. Monday the 24th at Town Hall. Thank you very much. Thank you again to our presenters from Wilderness Ravenel, from Save the Ivy River folks, and from the town's Water Treatment Plan Committee. Thank you very much, and a good night. Council members, if you would remain on, we have just a few minutes to cover some legal issues, and then we'll be done as well. And Jennifer, if you could make all the technological changes that need to be happened to do that.
Yep. So if you wish to go into closed session this evening, a motion to enter closed session under North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A3, to consult with an attorney retained or employed by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege, which privilege is hereby acknowledged. That motion would be in order.
Would someone make such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. We'll now go into closed session and
We need a roll call vote since we're online. Patrick.
Still people up there, do I see?
Jeff McKenna,
Yes.
Andrew Nagel,
No.
John Chase,
Yes.
Doug Jackson,
Yes.
Michelle Wood,
Yes.
Catherine Cordell,
Yes.
me.
What is your vote?
Yes.
6-1. So the procedure here is we're going to ask everybody, we're going to send everybody to the waiting room, and then I'll pull council forward and we'll lock the meeting.
Sounds good. Okay, guys, I'm going to run for a biology break while we're doing this. I'll be right back.